Alison was one of the first employees of the Trust and a former chair as well. Alison is an environmental consultant with specialisms in community engagement and nature conservation. She's had the important job in the early days of mapping out the Trust's priorities, planning them and influencing others outside the Trust to support her. Alison, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent. Good. You are there. So that's my summary, really, of your sort of track record with the Trustees. Is that a fair summary, would you say?
Yeah, at the start, yeah, very much that kind of agenda was what I was working on.
And what would you say your responsibilities were then in those early days?
We were feeling our way really in the early days, trying to work out actually what the community's priorities were. And somebody before I was employed by the Trust had the amazing brainwave of putting a piece onto the commercial TV channels, asking people to contact us and let us know if there was a piece of land at the bottom of their street that they were concerned about, that they knew was good for wildlife, but they were worried about whether it was protected, it was being managed, what its future was, what threats to development were being applied to it. So it was my real privilege to find myself going and sitting in church halls and people's living rooms and talking about what was happening down the road and whether we as a young wildlife trust would be able to help those local communities to protect those green spaces full of wildlife that they loved, but were concerned about. You know, there was a lot of benign neglect, Adrian, of the more natural green spaces in the conurbation. I mean, you can imagine in a post-industrial landscape, we had lots of holes in the ground, and there were lots of people who had an eye on what to fill those holes with, and mostly it was to do with rubbish, and therefore it became urban nature conservation became very oriented towards planning and working with local authority planners at a strategic level as well as at a local level to try and work out which of these places were rich enough for us to try and get designated as special sites of scientific interest. And places like Moseley Bog that you referred to. Joy Pfeiffer, one of my wildlife heroes, when I first joined the Trust, she was often referred to in the press as a housewife from Moseley. But that housewife from Moseley collected 12,000 signatures to a petition when it became known that the church diocese wanted to sell off part of the land at Moseley Bog to build just half a dozen houses. But those half a dozen houses would have gone right across the spring line that fed the bog, which fed the wood, the special plants in the bog, that had caused the bog to be designated as one of the very few urban sites of special scientific interest. And one of my most treasured possessions is a slide of Joy with her banner outside Birmingham Council House, resplendent, emblazoned with the word "Save Our Bog." And the point was that these messages had to be simple and they had to be driven home. Behind those community activists, we were one of the first trusts to employ graduate planners, Peter Woodward, Mike Dando, several others, and we had a planning unit for a few years. And it was their job to explore the possibilities of creating nature conservation strategies for each of the local authorities as well as the county council, and then taking on individual site issues. Now, of course, the Trust is still doing that today. Our biggest planning challenge in recent years has been HS2. And there was a lot of work went into defending the Trust position on that.
Sure. I'm just interested to hear about this community passion, though, because as someone who's lived pretty much all my life around the West Midlands, I know how much people value their green spaces. But I also know, and this is true of life generally, that people are only too happy to leave the hard work to somebody else. But generally, if a green space is threatened or is just simply neglected, have you found that there is a passion there from local people, even if it's a passion for somebody else to come in and do something to improve it or protect it?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell by my accent that I'm not a Brummie or a Black Country girl. I hail from the Northwest, and when I first got involved with the Trust, I really wanted to know that the people of Birmingham and the Black Country wanted nature on their doorsteps, that they were passionate about it. And I was lucky enough to have somebody sit in the greenhouse on top of Friends of the Earth warehouse back in 1980 and devise a plan for me to do some PhD research on community engagement in urban green spaces. And that gave me the chance to do some case study work with the communities from Plantsbrook Reservoirs and from Lecky Road in Walsall and from Queslett Quarry and several other places, to really get under the skin of that, Adrian, and find out, you know, why these places were important to the local community. And then out of that research came our understanding that if we could collaborate with the local planners and the landscape architects and the local politicians, then we could actually work together to protect some of these spaces and enhance them, both for people and for wildlife. So that, for me, set the whole of my career came from those early years working with those communities.
Brilliant. Am I right in thinking that you were responsible for drawing up the first nature conservation strategy for local councils?
I wasn't responsible for doing the first one, no. Peter Woodward and Rachel Berger put together the first county-wide nature conservation strategy. And then that was followed by Mike Dando, who did the Black Country nature conservation strategy. Then me, Pete, and two others, I think. And I'm just trying to, Rachel was involved in that as well, Pete, I think. We did the Birmingham nature conservation strategy in, was it 1984? Something like that. So we got complete coverage within a few years. And then since that time, we've had things like green infrastructure strategies that the local authorities have prepared. And we'll soon be needing something called nature recovery network plans as well, Adrian. So the need for that sort of strategic level of thinking about how all these places connect up and how we are able to get people into them and to explore them is still very, very pertinent today. And it's one of those things that needs updating all the time.
Well, let's see if we can get our next question from a member of the Trust's current staff.
Boris Johnson wants to build. Are you concerned that the government may weaken planning regulations that previous generations have fought for to protect our wildlife?
It is very worrying. And it needs to be caveated, doesn't it, with building our way out of the economic slump, but very much with the environment in mind. And we would, I think, as a trust, we would hope to be able to contribute to that economic recovery through the creation of new green jobs. That would be a real opportunity. But the weakening of planning legislation it's been incremental over many, many years now, and has not helped us in one respect. That said, just at the moment, Natural England are about to update what they call their green infrastructure standards, and that will impose on planning authorities the need to carefully consider development in the light of our need to protect nature and to protect natural green spaces for access by the public. So there is counter efforts going in, if you like, to strengthen certain areas of policy. But honestly, I still regularly write letters of objection to my planning authority about proposals in my neighbourhood.
Yeah, does it work, Alison?
We've saved quite a bit of land where the old Readings Rugby Club used to be. I think you'll remember that. We've protected rights of way locally. We've taken the council to judicial review to stop unwelcome development in certain areas. So sometimes, yeah.
It can work. Brilliant. There we go. Wildlife hero Alison Millward, thank you so much.